Today's discourse focuses on the test of selfhood, on identity, and answering the question, who am I? The lens we view today's discourse through are the teachings coming from the Great White Brotherhood, a spiritual order of Western saints and Eastern adepts who have reunited with the Spirit of the living God. These ascended masters inhabit pure spirit, although they have ways of reaching us. We can receive teachings from the masters at inner levels by going into meditation to commune with the Spirit, or we can be instructed by them when our souls leave the body during sleep and journey to the higher planes, the etheric octave. We can also receive teachings from the masters on outer levels through an anointed and trained messenger of the Brotherhood, who is the tradition of the prophets, who in the tradition of the prophets of old deliver dictations, which are messages from an ascended master, an archangel, or another advanced spiritual being delivered through the agency of the Holy Spirit. We may also be invited to enter a mystery school by the Brotherhood, where an ascended or an unascended master may teach us higher spiritual truths. Unseen mystery schools have been in operation since the expulsion of man and woman from the Garden of Eden, which was the mystery school of ascended master Lord Maitreya. Other examples being Pythagoras' school at Crotona, the Sangha of the Buddha, the Essene Gnostic community at Qumran, as well as in the Himalayas, the Far East and Egypt, Europe and South America. In 1984, Lord Maitreya re-established his mystery school in Montana through the messengers Mark and Elizabeth Clare Prophet. In this moment, envision we are initiates in a mystery school, students on the path to godhood, known in the East as chelas, eager to absorb the knowledge of the Master. Picture yourself abiding in a beautiful temple. Night is fading, the sun is rising, as we don our white robes and offer hymns of praise to the sun behind the sun. We perform morning rituals of purity through bathing and athletics. We meditate on the natural beauty that surrounds us as we work in the communal gardens. After our morning rituals, we enter the inner court of the temple, awaiting the word of the Master, who imparts gnosis through Socratic debate, a cooperative argument, dialogue between the Master and Chela that stimulates critical thinking, drawing out ideas and underlying presuppositions. The class comes to order. The Master enters, immediately starting a dialogue by asking us to expound on the ancient dictate, know thyself. Chela explains, the proverb, know thyself, is inscribed in gold letters on the walls of the vestibule of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Its origins are still debated, perhaps being one of the ancient maxims of the 7 wise men of Greece. Also, it is attributed to possibly Plato, Pythagoras, or Socrates. The Master retorts, and why should man know himself? And to probe even further, what is man? Silence from the group. Remember the parable, the hymn of the pearl, where gnosis impels the soul to awaken. Self-knowledge holds the key to opening the doorway to the spiritualization of the self. It breaks the pall of ignorance that holds the self in its grips. How can self be transformed if that to be which is transformed is not known? The Master asks rhetorically. Gnostic scriptures describe the impelling power of the call to awaken us from the sleep of the ages. It is startling to think that billions of souls on earth are not awake, but asleep to spiritual realities, dead to the realms of eternal truth. When we think about waking them up, we had better first wake up our own souls. And when we do, and our souls first rub their eyes and yawn and look around and say, "Where am I? Who am I?" and then drift off again into the sleep of oblivion, we must shake them awake. Yes, shake them awake. When you are awake, you see clearly, says the Master. When Gautama Buddha came on the scene, his disciples recognized him as an extraordinary being. They asked him, "Who are you? What are you? Are you a man? Are you human or divine?" He simply said, "I am awake." This is the power of gnosis. However, it is important not to mistake gnosis for intellectualism or some type of rational knowing. Gnosis is an experience of oneself, of the world, of God. Gnosis is not the end, it is the beginning of the path. The end is God. The Master continues, the dictate "Know Thyself" dates back to the most ancient mystery schools, back beyond the sands of ancient Lemuria and Atlantis, back to previous golden ages unrecorded in the annals of history of humankind. The more complete words are, "Man, know thyself." And these were inscribed on the portal of the temple through which the initiate entered. When the initiate had graduated, he left the temple through another door. Over were inscribed the words, "Man, know thyself as God." The journey between these 2 points is the topic of our Socratic dialogue today. The Master queries, if the end of the journey is God, how does one begin? In other words, what is critical to attain the allness of being? Silence? No ideas, dear Chelas? Very well, says the Master. Let us approach this from another angle. The self is the ultimate mystery of human life. To know true selfhood, your God identity, is the ultimate path to godhood. In reality, this is all there is. Ask yourself, beloved Chila, as a student of the hidden mysteries, what is self? Is it or is it not? What does it mean to be selfless? Is selflessness the denial of the self? Is it our walking away from all things of the world? What is identity? How would you diagram identity? First, realize the test of selfhood, of true identity, is a test. It's a test we all must face one day as we trek upward on our path to adeptship, as we come into a greater and greater awareness of God in us, God through us, God around us, and God all about us. We start to understand that the filaments of mortal identity must be replaced with the filaments of immortal self. In the wisdom traditions of the East, unlike the Western world, discovering selfhood, who you are, is a vital experience. It is an experience that comes only to those who seek it, who hunger for it, who strive for it. In Hinduism, selfhood means union with Supreme Brahman. Initiates unearth the deeper understanding of true self using the ancient practice of neti, neither this nor that. Through analytical meditations, they explore the nature of Brahman by first understanding what is not Brahman. As the process continues, they are able to identify with that point of contact that is the self of God, attaining union with the Absolute. In Buddhism, we have the perplexing riddle of non-self, interpreted as not having selfhood. Listen, O Chila, to the true teaching of the Buddha. Out of practicality, he taught the doctrine of anatta, the true meaning of which is that we don't have a separate self or ego. The intention of anatta is to awaken us to the non-separateness of being, the oneness of selfhood, and the continuity of the figure 8 energy flow from spirit to mater, from mater back to spirit. Buddha desired to liberate us from the illusion of the individual self, that we could recover the inner essence, the Dharmakaya, our own Buddha nature. In Taoism, self is not the exclusive center of our selfhood. It is not the exclusive center of our awareness and existence. To the Taoist, the temporal reality of human I-ness is meant to be transcended. The ultimate goal, to enter the heart of the Tao and to know yourself as all and nothing. I have an analogy for you, dear Chilas, to bring this picture into clearer focus. Think elevators and skyscrapers. Think about ascending in the tallest elevator in the world that is glass all around, even a glass ceiling. At ground zero, you have limited view, no vista. This is the perspective of the lower self. As the elevator ascends, you gain perspective, awareness of more and more around you. As you pass the 100th floor of the skyscraper, ascending to the penthouse observation deck, on a clear day you can see for many, many miles. This is the perspective of the higher self, the true self, having a clear view of the totality of the circumference of God's self-awareness. And when you attain this ultimate vista, you see all too clearly that there is an infinite number of skyscrapers of selfhood inhabiting cosmos, each with an elevator that by free will can ascend or descend levels of consciousness, and each one of them contains a unique true self, the one true spirit that is present in all sentient beings. Chilas, now that we are beginning to get some perspective on self, let us diagram selfhood. You are in reality a living flame. The flame above is called the I Am Presence. The I Am Presence is that portion of selfhood which is the permanent atom of being, the monad of self, suspended in the planes of spirit, just above the physical form. The Godhead individualized as a living flame, your sphere of identity. So the flame above is called the I Am Presence. The flame below is a spark anchored in the center of being. It is a threefold flame of the real self, having the attributes of fire, of power, wisdom, and love. This threefold flame is the fire of God that burns in the plane of matter to sustain the seed identity that was and is a living soul. And so you are a duality, my dear Chilas, a portion of self. The portion that is fully realized in God lives in spirit, and that portion of the self not yet fully realized and self-realized in God lives in the planes of matter. That is the portion of the self, of the soul, That portion is the soul. The many layers of awareness that surround the soul, the energy fields of mind and memory, emotions, feeling, physical form, and form consciousness have so polarized selfhood through an outer awareness that this outer awareness has become a synthetic self, diametrically opposed to the real self. And the soul that was intended to mirror the spirit has become a mirror for a world of whirling energies unlike its original identity, hence unreal. Remember the Gnostic story of the Hymn of the Pearl. It outlines that the soul has become a lost identity. Lost in time and space, it must be found again. It must find itself in God. This is the plight of the soul, lost in the force fields of a subconscious, a self-awareness that is below the threshold of God's self-awareness. Because we were given free will and the gift of life that is the threefold flame, we may consciously choose to affirm the law of the flame and the identity of the flame, and to call that flame myself. In doing so, we return to divine polarity, to the seat of authority, the authority of the real self to take dominion over the synthetic self. From that point of self-identification, all may proceed to draw the skeins of evolving soul identity into the central core of being that is the flame called God. At this point, the Chilas Heads may be spinning a bit, but the teacher continues. Have you ever thought about the fact that in this life and past lives, you have neglected the development of your soul, choosing instead to develop your human ego, the personality consciousness, or that you might have not nurtured your soul, this essential life essence that mirrors both your personality and the personality of God? How you have integrated these two personalities actually defines your soul identity. Have you ever thought about defining your own soul? For starters, think of your soul as a glistening, transparent sphere that is constantly evolving or devolving. The soul is a vital potential, a potential of the Spirit of God in you. The potential is there. The question is, what are you doing with it? To achieve immortality, the soul must be fused or bonded to her higher self. The soul can be lost. Spirit can never die. Thus it is written as the edict of the law that this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So until then, the soul remains a fallen potential that must be imbued with the reality of spirit. Day by day, line by line, the challenge of initiation, the test of selfhood, is to integrate the soul, that potential of selfhood, with permanent selfhood, Godhood. Close your eyes for a moment, if they're not already closed. Center in the heart. Bring your awareness to the center of the brow, the spiritual eye. And as you look through your mind's eye, see yourself as you really are. You are, in reality, a soul suspended in the grid of cosmic consciousness. Move your mind into cosmic dimensions of selfhood. Now stretch your imagination. See yourself jumping on the trampoline of God's mind. See yourself bouncing on the grid of energy that is pure intelligence, translucent, glistening, chords, intermeshed for the interplay of identities in and through the mind that is God. Yes, see yourself turning somersaults in your etheric body, the finer body, performing the gymnastics of mind and soul that lead to total self-identification with the being and consciousness that is God. Let the ball of identity bounce from the confines of the flesh. Let it leave the body and return at will, as a ball bouncing across the miles of terra, moving as a nucleus of energy over the surface of the earth, then bouncing into outer space, spanning the space between planets. Let yourself bounce across the cosmic highways and in and out of the planes of matter, so the ball of self is free to explore a cosmos. And through its million light years, and though it is a million light years away on etheric planes of consciousness, it can return in the twinkling of an eye to the body temple and body consciousness evolving on Terra. Free your mind to be everywhere in the consciousness of God. Free your mind to roam His mind. Free your desires to merge with God's desires to be, and let your soul's desires take on the desires of infinity. Deity sires creation, and the siring is the desiring of God to be more of Himself. Thus your soul desires to be more of God, and it is rightful and lawful to do so. I am everywhere in the consciousness of God. The Master continues the dialogue. Chelas, realize all genuine spiritual traditions recognize we are far more than we recognize ourselves to be. These traditions understand that our small, selfish self is blocking our realization of our true nature. We can only move into higher realms of consciousness and awareness when we shed this lower self, casting aside its egotism. Achila asks, Master, what is true selflessness? The master fires back, Dear Chila, what do you think? Achila timidly responds, being more concerned with the needs and wishes of others than with one's own self? The master explains, that is a worldly definition. Buddhists use an analogy to illustrate selflessness, of the silliness of our belief and attachment to a little self, and our belief in a solid, unchanging self or ego. To illustrate the point, imagine you are walking in the woods at dusk at the end of a summer's day. Suddenly, you see a shape on the ground just ahead of you. It's a snake. You're scared, but as you stand back there in shock, as still as you can be, you begin to notice that the snake is not moving. Tentatively, you bend closer. It's not a snake after all. It's just an old piece of striped rope. After a chuckle at your mistake, and with a sense of relief, you move on. On one hand, this is just a little story, but on the other, it's a metaphor for one of Buddhism's most profound insights into the human condition. Just as we fail to see the true nature of the snake, we fail to see the true nature of the self. Believing it to be real, we cling to the self, mistakenly believing the self to be real, something separate. However, when we cease clinging to the idea of this illusion of I-ness, selflessness is attained, and we're able to ascend to the highest self, your spiritual essence. Taoism takes a slightly different perspective on the clinging to I-ness. The great Taoist sages say, no self is true self. Forgetting the self describes the process of losing the sense of a self that is separate from ultimate reality. When selflessness is attained, the distinction between I and other disappears. There is no separation of the higher and lower self. Taoism's conception of selflessness, however, does not deny the self, as in Buddhism, according to which there is no such entity to begin with. Taoists say losing the self does not mean obliterating your identity. It means not letting go of your lesser self. It means not letting your lesser self get in the way of the higher self. But Master asks Achila, what will happen to my identity, to me, if I become part of the infinite ocean of consciousness? O Chila, know that the most among mankind who think they have identity only have a meager aspect of the true identity of God. Do not wallow in the fear of the loss of self, but desire to see the sugar cube of self, of identity dissolve, and to allow the fear, the ultimate fear, the loss of self to be endured. For in that movement and in that trembling, there is war within your members, as that which is aware of self, apart from God, ceases to be in the fullness of reality. For suddenly, in a moment, true divinity descending shall swallow up that not-self, that fear, and true enlightenment shall unveil the one who is thy true divine nature. Give birth to this, beloved, give birth to this. Then thou shalt know new pinions that shall carry thee into new realms of light. For only in selflessness can you encompass the whole, the allness of being. The less aware of self you become, the more of God you can contain. The less aware of self you become, the more of God you can contain. So increase this spirit within yourselves, beloved Chilas, and see how God will work through you. Another Chila, slightly vexed, asked the Master, how do you know when you have become selfless? The Master responds, to know you have become selfless, paradoxically, is to not be aware of the choice of selflessness. When you have the flame of selflessness, what are you? You are the purity and the perfection of the higher self in manifestation, without obstacle, without the marring aspects of human consciousness. For in the flame of selflessness, you are without the personality of the lower self, And therefore, if you would be the flame of that spirit, being all things to all people as God is, then the spirit of selflessness is the flame you must become. Moreover, know, dear Chios, how strong is the person that has the flame of selflessness. What an identity! What a powerful individuality! Not someone who is disappearing behind the curtain as the anonymous one. Nay, the full power of the Almighty One is upon him. For only in the flame of selflessness can one be trusted with the full energies of God's power. Only in selflessness can the soul be trusted with omnipotence. For you yourself, dear Chio, would be astounded to know how much power and how much wisdom and how much love can be contained in the life of the individual who has become the selfless one. The soul ensconced in this spirit is the one who will make his mark on the age. This is the one who mankind will identify with according to their need. Paradoxically, then, the flame of selflessness is the highest manifestation of reality. O Chilas of the White Fire Corps, remember, as you pursue this path, the student becomes the master, and day by day you will contact more and more of that one who lives in the sun, behind the sun of your own being, a great cosmic consciousness, your own mighty I Am presence. You have been given a great privilege, an opportunity to study under the Great White Brotherhood, that you might bring untold thousands into the teaching of the White Fire Corps and the chanting of the I Am that I Am. And so may you be examples and teachers to other evolutions from Earth's schoolroom, who one day must also face the test of selfhood, of identity, and give answer to the question, I am that I am. And may this Earth also be an example of cosmic Christ awareness to the solar system and to other systems of worlds. Beloved Chilas, I seal you in the all-consuming power that transforms selfhood into godhood, which is yours to claim with every breath you breathe. May you celebrate it, knowing thyself and living forever as God and no longer as mortals. Parusha.